Welcome everybody. I'm József Lennart from the Institute of Regional Studies in Hungary, and I will be the chair of this early morning session. And I'd like to welcome our first presenters, Mihály Kozlovs, and I'd like to ask him to share his thoughts about this quite intriguing topic.
Thank you, Joseph, for introduction. I'm glad to be today with the team of colleagues and present my work. So I'm a researcher of the remittances and emigration, and I'm trying in this paper to see how social innovation impact what's the social innovations impact on economies through immigration and remittances analysis in the Baltic countries. I'm looking into the period of a bit more than 5 years, but in this research I was depicting what has been happening in these 5 years. So just to show you a bit of geography of my study, I'm looking into the Baltic region, but in specific I'm looking in 3 very particular regions of the Baltic countries. It's Estonia and Narva, which is let's say 90% Russian speaking, which is Daugavpils in Latvia, quite close to the Russian border as well, and let's say it's 85% Russian speaking, and Visagines, much smaller town but still close to the border region with Belarus, and as well very Russian speaking towns of the Baltic countries. So I'm looking how immigration is impacting not only Baltic like large economies like of 3 Baltic countries, but as well the regions, very particular regions of these countries, very Slavic regions of these countries. So the objectives of the study is to compare migration processes and patterns within the countries, and to see how these how it is different in these 3 particular regions, which are kind of as well lagging behind. So definitely there were some limitations in my research. There was an availability of certain statistics. We are still lacking comparable data, even if the region is quite small, but still there were some discrepancies in this. So I was using two models in order to evaluate the impact of immigration and remittances within the Baltic region. Mostly was using data sources of national statistic bureaus of three countries. Main observations which I should mention, that of course the level of remittances sent to the Baltics followed the economic curves of the countries. I should mention that the Estonian market was the only one which was through the respected period growing. We've seen the growth of remittances for the last even 10 years. But if we talk about Latvia and Lithuania, then in Latvia, remittances level dropped by 35%. So people were sending less money in last 10 years, and Lithuania by 17%. If we talk about these specific particular regions by the borders and with high proportion of Slavic population, we call them like low income regions, and we divide them into 2 regions, like low income and low growth, where Estonia, Narva, and Latvia and Daugavpils, they are showing enough growth opportunities, but still still they're kind of less developed than other parts of Latvia and Estonia, and where Lithuania and Visagina is experiencing like stagnant productivity and job destruction, but still quite similar, all three regions in the outfit. The research results show that in less than a decade, Baltic region's populations shrunk by more than 500,000 people. That's of course tremendous loss for the economy, tremendous loss for in terms of taxes, which could have been paid but were not. But from the other side, we see that more than 35 billion of remittances were sent by those who left. And this amount of money cannot be neglected. And that's why in my research, I'm waiting on one part of the weights. I'm putting the level of remittances and possible taxes from expenditure which could have been paid, which were paid from these remittances. And on the other part of the weights, I'm putting the possible payments of taxes if the immigrants wouldn't leave three countries. So if these more than 500,000 people, 630,000 people, if they stayed in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they would definitely be either working a very simple jobs or some better jobs, but then their income would be taxed, and this is an important part of circulation of money within the countries, and that's a possibility for countries to grow. So you see as well in this graph that Baltic remittances were following a quite similar track of GDP fluctuations. If we look at the remittances and adjust them to GDP share in lagging behind regions, then you would see as well that in Ida-Virumaa region, which is Estonian northeast part, where Narva city is located, we see quite a light but still growth of remittances throughout last 8 years, where in other parts of the Baltics, the remittances level was dropping. In the minimal impact scenario for the Latvian economy, I was looking into into the scenario that all the immigrants who left, I was modeling that they are staying in Latvia, they are working simple jobs and receiving minimal wage, and then you see that by leaving, we have more than, let's say, in terms of factors included in this model, we see that immigrants still bring more benefits for the region country than they could have give by staying in the country. In terms of the average impact scenario, where I was looking and modeling that if people wouldn't leave, they would be working with average wage, and then we can see that the loss from one immigrant annually increases tremendously. So in previous slide, we would see that monthly a loss from one immigrant is in 2018 was about 90 euros, but then in the same year, if the same person works with average wage, its impact on economy is growing more than 4 times. It's becoming like 432 euros monthly, which economy is losing in Latvia. Similarly, we can observe as well the same models developed for Lithuanian economy, and we observe that in last 5 years level of remittances decreased, but it's still say an important amount, and it's higher than possible unpaid value-added tax and income tax from the average wage. So it's still more beneficial, let's say, for Baltic economies to let their people go abroad, work there, and send remittances, because level of wages which are currently in the Baltics are not substantial and are not giving the same benefit to local economies. If we look at the Estonian market, then both models show that immigration is still beneficial for Estonian economy as well. When I was looking as well and adjusting the impact of immigration into the regions, then we've seen that both minimal and average impact scenarios show that regionally immigrants could have heavily supported regions if they stayed and paid at least value-added tax from minimal salaries. So the main conclusions, I'd say that the calculated effect from unpaid taxes, even in average impact scenario, reaches maximum only 72% of the annual total amount of remittances. So it's still remittances are more beneficial for economies than people staying and working in these countries. But of course, we shouldn't neglect that there are many other factors which are not included into my calculations, and probably these 30% are not worth it, losing people. And as well, we understand that by raising of minimal wage, by raising of the average wages and income of people in the Baltics, we'll see that this discrepancy between remittance benefit will be shrinking, and with time, definitely remittances will become much smaller than possible positive effect from people staying. I'd say these are like main conclusions. As I've mentioned in my last point, that calculated positive effect of remittances, which is currently seen, may be reversed, and I believe that it will be reversed if more factors are taken into consideration. Thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have one question. You mentioned that you selected case studies from the eastern borders, from Russian-speaking, mostly Russian-speaking communities. And what, in your opinion, is the emigration and remittances are different, for example, in these communities than like, for example, western part of the country, or there are different directions of emigration, like the Russian-speaking communities work, for example, in Narva, work on the other side of the border, or maybe St. Petersburg, or they are also oriented to the western labor markets?
Mostly the migration is only directed into the West. That's especially with current circumstances, with the war and with the war. very small percentage is still looking into the eastern direction, but mostly it's the West, and the West as well gives Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians a possibility to earn more, and that's the main factor of emigration. Yeah, but these regions, these lagging behind regions, possibility to find work is much smaller, and that's why they are leaving these regions. But definitely this region would benefit the most if these people stay and develop their business or find better paid work. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your answer. Start with the second presentation,
Thank you.
which will be mine. Just okay, perfect. All right, so I am József Lennert from the Institute for Regional Studies, and the aim of this presentation is twofold. At first, I'd like to introduce my initial attempt to create a special forecast of the demographic processes of Hungary with using agent-based methodology. And after that, I'd like to share you the ideas and current outlines of an updated methodology which utilizes statistical modeling procedure. So, to understand the advantages of agent-based methodology, I'd like to share at first the most frequently used method first, the cohort component method. So the basics of this cohort component demographic projection method is that it divides the population into distinct groups called cohorts based on age groups, sex, and residence. And for each cohort, mortality and fertility assumptions have to be made. One of the advantages of the cohort component model is that it is easily applicable and good for the population projection based on natural movement. So it is good for projecting the demographic future of large spatial units, like for example countries or continents. But if we want to do a population projection with great spatial resolution, the reliability of the cohort component method is decreasing. The need for integrating internal migration assumptions into the cohort component model is one of the biggest issues. The same way we gave cohort-specific fertility and mortality assumptions, we can also make internal migration assumptions, but both assumptions made with percentages or direct number assumptions can break the model and can lead to totally non-valid projections in the long term or in the longest term. Using pool approach might work, but pool approach is still very rigid, and in pool approach, flows are still not modeled properly. So another possibility is using agent-based modeling methodology. Agents are autonomous entities with dedicated attributes and roles of behavior. Agents can be referred to. Agents usually cannot be divided further and can participate in decisions, acts, or subjects of certain events. Typically, if we use agent-based modeling in demographic modeling, agents are the symbolic representatives of people. To put this into context, let's have a group of 10 people in the same cohort, and say 5% of will expire during a given time period. If we use cohort component methodology with these assumptions, the result, the surviving population will be 9.5, and it will be always 9.5 because cohort component method is deterministic. Naturally, half person cannot survive, but that's why cohort component method is usually used by much larger populations, and the fractions are still there, but they are rounded up or summarized. While agent-based methodology, the 5% or the 95% surviving rate is a decision or lifetime event which will be decided to each agent independently, and it gives us a stochastic result. For example, the number of survivors at a given time period can be 10, 9, or even 8 or less. Usually, the heterogeneity of the agents can be a key factor in demographic modeling. This heterogeneity can mean a very wide range of things, from age groups to economic status or education. Agent-based modeling is favored for researching emergent phenomena, which is emergent phenomena is rising from the heterogeneity of the unique particles, and it is a very typical phenomena of the human societies. For example, migration patterns arising from individual decisions can be seen as emergent phenomena. Now, let me describe my first attempt of using agent-based methodology. As I said, the agents are representing the 9.8 million inhabitants of Hungary, and in my first attempt, the agents were given the following attributes: sex, age group, residency by municipality, and a socioeconomic background index. This data is also based on municipality data. During each modeling cycles, my agents underwent 2 natural movement events and have to make 2 internal migration decisions. And these internal migrations are governed by the value expectancy model and life course approach, which had to formulate the desire to participate based on the mentioned agent characteristics like age group, sex, or socioeconomic background index. And the realization of the intentions is governed by push-pull factors, like in these migration models, and barriers were also put in place to decide the areas which population emigrates from, and areas which are receiving surplus population. So different in this projection, multiple different scenarios were made, which differ from each other based on the mortality and fertility assumptions for the future, or macroeconomic trends, and also different climate scenarios were integrated into the model. We can see that how these different natural movement assumptions are heavily impacting the country-wide baseline of the population change trajectory, like in the low assumptions, in the worst assumptions, the population for the second half of the century may sink as low as 8.9 million, while according to the high assumptions, it may be possible to preserve the population of Hungary above 9 million. And we can see that the main feature of this agent-based methodology is that we can create more spatially diverse or model, and we can see that how the spatial differences are showing us a quite different picture than the country-wide trend. For example, the catchment area, the agglomeration ring around the Budapest, the capital city, might still grow its population significantly in the following decades, despite the general trends of population shrinkage. And we can see that some of the regional centers may also have better demographic outlooks than the rest of the country, while especially the southern Great Plain, most part of the southern Great Plain have to deal with quite extreme population loss in the following decades. And this model was good to show the differences in the, for example, the change of the age structure of the population, the old age dependency ratio, the percentage of old age population for the active population is getting higher in each scenario, but there are great territorial differences also in this trend too, because of the age-selective migration patterns. There will be regions like, for example, the agglomeration of the capital city, which will preserve more active population, while in some areas, some rural areas, there will be real challenge for social sustainability, that the tip of the age balance will be turned to the less active direction. All right. So this methodology had many deficiencies, and I'd like to overcome these deficiencies, but to achieve that, I needed to create a more a better agent attribute database, because the main challenge is that in the initial state, the agents had to the agents needed to get as many detailed attributes as possible, not just sex or age groups, but education, economic status, family status. And there are no suitable database which can be used directly to create this agent attribute database, but the general population census in theory can be suitable, but practically cannot be used directly. But there is one workaround, a solution, a statistical matching, which is statistical matching is integrating two or more data sources related to the same target population in order to derive unique synthetic data from the variables. And I run out of time, so I cover this very quickly. We can see that there are publicly available data sets of the current population census, which is still the last population census 10 years ago. And these publicly available data sets can be used, can cover a part of the overall information which needed to create these 6 unique attributes which I need. Okay, and I considered the agent table and the original table as 2 different universes, and I formulated an iterative procedure to change the attributes of the agent table to resemble the original table in each aspect. And this iterative procedure only accepts the modifications which are making the similarities of the desired table and the original tables larger. And with this formulated algorithm, 99% statistical matching accuracy, I achieved over 99% statistical matching accuracy. Thank you for your attention. The next presenter will be Anya Rossell.
My talk will be on the impact of return initiatives on return migration to rural region. I will start right away. We have a look at the impact of these return initiatives in Germany, so a kind of different country now, but it's a very interesting sample, I think, because we have a lot of counties in Germany who established return initiatives in the last years. Here on the right, I hope maybe you see my mouse. On the right, you see a map of Germany, where different countries are colored in different colors regarding the year of establishment of these return initiatives. And what we see is that in the older years in our sample, we have a lot of return initiatives that have been established in Eastern Germany, which is not surprising since these are the regions in Germany who are lagging more dramatically due to the demographic change than other regions in Germany. But we also see that in more recent years, we have counties in Germany where these return initiatives have been established in Western Germany. So there seems also to be a problem in these rather rural regions to whether get back workers who left these regions. So what is the exact definition of these return initiatives? There is no unique definition. Every country can decide on its own whether they want to establish such initiatives, and they can decide how they wanna, what kind of initiatives they wanna establish. What they all have in common is that they want to increase the return migration to the region by addressing decline in local labor supply. And what they usually do is they provide information, usually on local vacancy, potential employers. They provide this information often on websites, but they also provide personal support, or they do fairs where they meet a lot of people they can inform. And they try to establish a good job match for these workers who want to come back but are somehow not able to return. And by providing this information, these initiatives want to reduce potential spatial search frictions. And that's where we add to the literature, in our opinion. So far there is no paper on this kind of topic. It's the first one who measures the impact of these policy measures. but we find some literature on the reduction of search friction and its impact on internal migration. And there are some recent studies who look at this. For example, Balgova, who had a look at the US and looked at the fact that workers from different industries got information for jobs via internet and TV, and that really helped to reduce these search frictions, and people were more likely to come to these regions where information was given. So our contribution of this paper is to provide first evidence on these specific return initiatives, and also to provide more suggestive evidence on the importance of spatial search frictions for migration. The data that we use is typical German labor market data, the integrated employment biographies, where we have daily information on all people in Germany who are either employed or unemployed. We consider all workers who leave the local labor market more than 50 kilometers away after graduating vocational training. These are our potential return migrants who can come back to the region where they graduated. In the end, we have over 2 million worker year observations. I said that we have daily information, but we don't have daily information on the place of residence. That's why we have to provide a yearly panel, but we use this daily information we have to generate a wide mix of variables we control for. For example, we have information on wage, recent employment status, tenure, work experience, schooling degree, sex, nationality, and so on and so on. So we really have rich information, and we can control, or we hope to control for the majority of factors that are relevant for migration. We also merged some information on local labor market conditions like occupation-specific wage level, unemployment rate, economic specialization, employment density, and so on. Our model looks as follows. We try to model the hazard rates or the probability to migrate back, given that the individual hasn't migrated until point T. That is common discrete single axis duration model, and we control, as I said, for very much different characteristics of the worker, which is X, and regional characteristics M and N for the region of destination and region of origin, and we control for fixed effects for these both regions, and we have a East Germany dummy. And what we are mostly interested in this specification is this term on the right, RE, return initiatives. So we want to know, this is a dummy, could be a dummy variable. What factor does this have? What impact does this have on the return in the likelihood to return? We use different specification for this term. In the first step, we use a panel event study just to see how the dynamic of these effects evolves over time. But we also use a more aggregated form of this return initiatives coefficient, just because we want to distinguish between different groups later on, and we somehow get into trouble with number of observations and significance when we look at different worker groups. I would skip that due to the fact that I am late, but we just comment that I'm only showing you the base results we have. In our paper, if you're interested, we have done a lot of robustness checks just to verify that our effect is really robust. But here are the main results. This is the first specification where we want to see the dynamic of the effect. and time 0 is the time the return initiative has been established. And what we see here is that in the years before the initiative has been established, we do not see any significant effect of the initiative, meaning that the likelihood to return is not higher for those people who migrated from a region where the initiative has been established. But if you look at the years after the establishment, we see in the first years we do not see a significant effect, but afterwards we see a positive significant effect. And it means that the likelihood to return is about 20% higher if you moved from a region where this return initiative has been established later on. So it seems that our specification controlling for all these characteristics finds a significant positive effect, which seems to be logical that it's not right away, but it's positive and significant a couple of years after the return initiative has been established. As I said, we aggregate these years just to have enough number of observations for each group of workers we want to look at, and that's why we distinguish between short-term effect and medium-term effect. And if you look at the first column, the full sample of workers, more than 400,000 workers, we find this, what we already have seen in the graphic, significant positive effect. But if we distinguish these groups, these workers, we see that this effect is mostly driven by this kind of group of workers, where we also find a highly positive effect, and these are medium wage workers. We distinguish workers by medium wage just to approximate their ability level somehow with wages. So it seems that this effect that we see is mostly driven by medium wage workers. We slightly see a positive effect for high wage worker, but it's not as significant, although the effect in absolute terms is higher. But we argue that this is due to the fact that we only have 67,000 workers in this group and a rich set of variables, so it's harder to find a significant effect. What may be also interesting is this effect here, where we distinguish between workers where we don't observe a wage. These are workers who left the region where they graduated right after graduation. So it seems that these people are less attached to the region than workers who stayed longer in the region where we observe a wage. So here we find a positive effect for those workers who stayed longer in the region after graduation, which seems also logical. I would skip that too. That's just the results from a robustness check where we applied matching, but we also conclude here that the medium wage workers drive the positive effect, but also somehow the high wage workers too. So let's conclude. I'm still in time, I hope. We find on average a significant effect, which is positive and which is positive regarding all our robustness check we do in our paper. We find that these results, these positive effects, are in line with the literature, who also find positive effect regarding the reduction of spatial search frictions. But what we also see that this effect differs with regard to abilities, to qualification of workers. We see that mostly medium and high wage workers show a positive effect. Yeah, so we provide to the literature by giving more evidence on these spatial search frictions, and we see, at least in Germany, that the establishment of alternative initiatives had positive effect and seem to be helping to bring back workers who are just very important for the economic conditions in rural regions and especially in Germany, in Eastern Germany. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy about questions.
Thank you, Anna, for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have one question. As I understood, this initiative was effective, but is it cost effective? So the outcomes are much bigger than I think this initiative has some costs of working. Is it in line with the positive income for the return?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. We already think about it to look at this factor in another paper. So that would be another paper, but that would be our next step. What I would say at the moment is, I mean, these are return initiatives who usually provide information on websites who are maybe not that costly than other initiatives. So maybe it is cost effective, but that's definitely something we want to look at in another paper. Yeah. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And I'd like to ask the next presenter.
Thank you very much. So my name is Isaiah Juma Market. I'm a PhD student at the University of Szeged in Hungary. So I'm gonna present part of my results of my dissertation together with my supervisors, that is Dr. Skaline Kano and Dr. Sofia Vash, who are altogether associate professors in the Faculty of Economics and Business Administration at the same university. So in today's presentation, I'm going to present to you the relationship between urban agglomeration and income inequality by actually examining if the Kuznets hypothesis curve is valid for sub-Saharan African case. So in particular, urbanization is seen as a valuable outcome of any economic transformation, in that as nations develop, a huge chunk of its population end up in urban regions, simply because people tend to shift from perceived underdeveloped rural world to the perceived developed urban regions in quest of accessing full economic opportunities or other better paying jobs. That's as per Kuznets 1955 and latest studies such as Castells, Quintana, and Moreno. So another key aspect is that burgeoning urbanization and subsequent concentration of people in urban regions leads to uncontainable widening of or variation of the economic opportunities to people. And in particular, in the case of sub-Saharan Africa, about 50% of its population is anticipated to be urban by 2030. That is as per World Bank. So theoretically, to actually put together the nexus between urban agglomeration and income inequality, we follow the inverted Kuznets hypothesis as shown in this figure, whereby the relationship here alludes that as urban agglomeration rises, income gap widens between the urban sectors, that is the informal and the formal sectors. And in summary, income distribution tends to vary as per urbanization rate and as per the urban agglomeration rate as well. In that, in the beginning, the income inequality will rise together with the urban agglomeration and peak at some middle point and then fall at the later stages of urbanization and concentration of people. So in terms of empirical literature, we found that there are two existing um, uh, strands in literature. And the first strand is there is nonlinear relationship between urban agglomeration and income inequality, as supported by these studies. And in the second instance, there is linear relationship, as such, evidencing absence or no inverted U-shaped link between urban agglomeration and income inequality. So why this study is that most of the studies are focused so much on the national level nexuses, as opposed to regional economic wide uh, um, unit of analysis. As in this case, we are focusing on the sub-Saharan Africa. The other gap to be filled by this study is that most of the studies are focused on other regions such as China and European nations, and as such, very minimal literature is available for sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, in this area, I found two notable studies, that is for Adams and Global, as well as of the Sulemana 2019, to be the leading studies focusing on the sub-Saharan Africa. So due to the inconsistencies of no strict relationship between urban agglomeration and income inequality, as well as the scanty literature focusing on sub-Saharan Africa, we intended to fill these gaps by using 22 sub-Saharan African countries and a panel data spanning between 2000 and 2020, following a time-space panel dynamic model, as shown here in equation 1, whereby GT is our GNI index as a measure of income inequality. Then we have the UA, which is now the matrix of the independent variable, in this case, the urban agglomeration. Then we have ZT representing the vector of the unobserved covariates of the dependent variable, which in this case is taken care of by the control variables. Then one of the assumptions that we base in this analysis is that the time period that is between 2000 and 2020 is fixed, and the number of the cross-section observations, that is N, is sufficiently large. We also use the moment method of moments estimation methods, that is the GMM difference and GMM systems, as depicted by this equation 2, which is actually difference GMM model, to see whether the results hold if we compare the conventional regression methods and the method of moment estimation methods of the panel dynamic model. So in terms of variable description, our main dependent variable here is income inequality, which is described as the economic disparity. And we sourced the data from the Standard World Income Inequality Database in comparison with the World Bank Development Indicators of the GNI. And then our key independent variable is the urban agglomeration. We measured it using the urban share of population. Then we also use the population density, basically measured by the population above 1 million. We sourced the data from the World Bank. Then we also control for different variables. We control regional economic performance measured by the GDP per capita. We also control the urbanization rates, which we measured using the ratio of urban population to that of the rural population. We also controlled for industrialization, which we measured using the employment in urban industries. Then we controlled for the rural urban migration rates. which we measured using the ratio of people employed in the agricultural sector to that of the industrial employment. In terms of data analysis, so we started with the describing the data, and we observed notably that between the period of 2000 and 2020, the GNI, or the income inequality, averaged at 0.62, or rather 62%. We also observed that the mean urban population density was 4.869 million people, and the urban share of population is the key urban agglomeration, averaged at 12.243 million people. So those were the key things that we observed in the described data. So we also wanted to see if there is any kind of correlation between the variables. But what we observed, that there was a general weak relationship between urban agglomeration and income inequality measures, as seen by this value, correlation coefficient of 0.048. We also observed that the correlation coefficient between the income inequality and that of the control variables was insignificantly positive and negative, as shown in this figure 2. In terms of stationarity tests, we used different tests, and what we observed, that all tests confirmed rejection of no stationarity for the income inequality, that is the log of GNI at level 4. So what we observed, that income inequality and the measures of urban agglomeration were integrated to order 1, or order 0, sorry. And then the urbanization rate and industrialization were all integrated to level 1. And then we had rural urban migration and that of GDP per capita being integrated to order 2. So to determine the linear relationship, we followed panel dynamic model as stated earlier, using different estimation methods. We combined both the conventional regression methods, that is the pooled OLS, fixed effect, and random effect. And in this case, we observed that there is significant negative and positive relationship between GNI and urban agglomeration. Specifically, because we were using 2 measures. So one measure pointed that there is negative relationship, and another measure pointed that there is a positive relationship. We also observed insignificant effects of the controlled variables, as shown in this table. In terms of GMM difference, that is first step and second step, we found significant positive nexus between income inequality and industrialization. And in GMM systems, we observed significant positive and negative, just as it was in the conventional regression methods. We also observed that our model was correctly specified following the insignificant J statistics. We found that our estimates were very reliable, as shown by the significant world chi-square test, and we preferred fixed effect as opposed to random effect, as informed by the insignificant Houseman test. In terms of nonlinear relationship, we incorporated the squared values of our key variables, that is the squared urban agglomeration values. We also squared the value of GDP per capita and urbanization rate, because we found that these are strongly related with the income inequality. So having included the square variables, we realize that the relationship is maintained and there is no nonlinear nexuses. And of course, our model was correctly specified as shown by the J statistic, and there was no serial correlation as shown by the RLNO R1 and R2. We drew the conclusion that there is linear and nonlinear relationship depending on the measure included. We also observed that there is the existence of both positive and negative relationship of income inequality and urban agglomeration. And we observed that our results align with the theoretical assertions of inverted U-shaped Kuznets hypothesis. Therefore, our conclusion based on these findings is that the relationship between urban agglomeration and income inequality is not a classic case that in one region is generalized to be a reflection in another region. In terms of policy recommendation, we recommended that the Sub-Saharan African development agencies and stakeholders to rethink the development policies, which could be in terms of the decentralizing farms so that to take care of the high rate of urbanization or the concentration of people in urban regions as opposed to rural regions. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your audience. If you have any question, I gladly welcome you to ask me. Thank you.
So, is these conclusions are true to the whole sub-Saharan groups, or there are some outliers which may see in this figure?
So this is specifically for Sub-Saharan African countries, but as I have alluded in this, the figure is the case of South Africa and the case of Congo and Nigeria. These three countries have kind of outliers of urban share of population in terms of their concentration. Because you find that a country like Nigeria, which is one of the largely populated countries in Africa, it has a bigger share of its population in urban regions. That's why you find that they are falling outside the majority in this case.
We may move to the last presenter, Anna Grzegorczyk. I hope I'm correct in pronunciation.
Thank you for the possibility to participate in this conference. Today I'd like to present the preliminary analysis of my current research on mobility segregation throughout the lifetime among Warsaw inhabitants. So now we move to Poland. Today I would like to focus on the patterns of segregation of lower social profiles habitants. I put two aims to the presentation. The first one is to define the concept of mobility segregation during lifetime. And the second aim is to distinguish the mobility segregation patterns among Warsaw inhabitants that are characterized by lower social profile. I asked three research questions. The first question to this second aim of the presentation is, does the mobility segregation change over the lifetime? How does this change occur? That is, at what stages of life the mobility segregation decreases or increases, and which places and people encountered there, and which forms of mobility contribute to this change? And the last research question, which events can be considered as windows of change? I ask more precise research questions to those said. what is important, that is places and mobilities are in the center of my research, and they are characterized by people characteristics that we can encounter in places and during as we are mobile. And I propose 3 hypotheses to research questions. The first one is during a lifetime, there is a change in the mobility segregation. The second one, the early stages of life are characterized by the highest level of mobility segregation. That is, limited number of places visited, their greater homogeneity, and limited number of forms of mobility. However, segregation may decrease in later stages of life. And the third hypothesis, windows of change, that is, key events for changing spatial behavior, when the level of mobility segregation may change, are starting secondary school and university, moving to another city, taking up a new job, entering in a close relationship with another person, the birth of a child entering next learning stage. Mobility segregation concept can be rooted in both classic and contemporary research perspectives. First of all, we should mention social segregation concept, that is an even distribution of population groups of certain characteristic in a specific area. And it was the phenomenon I dealt with in my previous research. It considered residential segregation, and it was quite static. So the next concept we should mention here, it is time geography, according to which the individual's life path consists of daily route between fixed locations. And although this concept was criticized, however, both of them, so social segregation measures and space-time prisms, were used in activity space segregation concept, that is separation between groups of people based on systematic differences in the places they come into direct contact with. I relate also to a sociological school of everyday life, and in geographical context to geobiography, that is a spatial life path of an individual person that is drawn by a set of residential places, which are resultant of historical and social environments. And both of these methods use biographies as a method of research. And the most current perspective that is important to me, it is new mobility paradigm. So a new paradigm in social sciences that corresponds more to postmodern societies in constant move. Here, mobility is defined as a both long distance and local everyday movement of people. And to me are the most important terms that I refer to. It is uneven mobility, it is immobility, it is mortality, and mobility justice. So these are all new dimensions of social inequalities and social justice according to new mobility paradigm. Okay, so what is it? Mobility segregation. Mobility segregation, it is our social bubble. So wherever we move, we meet people who have the same social profile, who have the same social characteristic as we during whole our life. Here I propose the definition. I will only read the beginning of this. So mobility segregation, it is an equal distribution of routine mobility practices in terms of their character and meaning between definite places and relations during lifetime. So high mobility segregation, it will be meeting in every place people who are similar in social terms to to us throughout our timeline. And what is the methodology of the research? Firstly, I gathered biographical material that was divided into 3 steps. The first one was pre-task and establishing contact with narrators. They had 2 tasks. The first one, it was diary, me and my life, entitled me and my life, and the second photo report entitled Capture the Moments. It took 5 days, 4 working days and 1 Saturday. The main method of data collection was biographical interview. And the thematic areas that I focused on, these were people and places, mobility, windows of change, and pandemic. After that, I analyzed the text and choose cases for further analysis. Then I came back to narrators and gathered material through in-depth interviews. Then these thematic areas consisted of home, studies and work, mobility, relations, networks, and places networks. After that, I moved to analysis. The first step was coding the interviews in Maxcuda Plus program and elaboration on biographical access. This is the beginning of the analysis of the material. In qualitative research, the research sample isn't representative in the statistical sense of the term. It is, according to the theory-guided approach, the qualitative sampling. Each case is treated as a generalizable expression of social reality. So variety, it prioritizes variety over representativeness. And in my research, narrators were had different socio-demographic characteristics in terms of gender, age, familial situation, district of residence in Warsaw, and level of education. What they had in common, they were all of lower social profile that was distinguished by their low income. They were all economically active, and they were performing a simple profession. They were low-level employees. And here are the social demographic characteristics of my narrators. So here we can see mixing the group in terms of gender and age, in terms of education, residence, place of residence in Warsaw, in different districts in Warsaw, different family status. So there were 3 single persons, 3 dings, 3 families with small children, 4 families with older children, and empty nesters. And they had, as we can see here, they had different occupations, but all of them were considered as simple. Here's the summary of the collected material and summary of this first step of encoding the fragments of biographies. And today I won't focus on this. I would like to move to more precise analysis based on this encoding and creating a coding tree. I created a typology of narrators' biographies. I divided it into 6 types. And first 3 types consider biographies, narrators who are the most segregated. So they live in a homogeneous social environment, And the last three, the mobility segregation levels are relatively lower, so their social environment is heterogeneous. And for further analysis of the meanings, social meaning of mobility segregation, I add additional category if in the biography there was upward social mobility without changing social position, or downward social mobility for first three types and second three types. And today I would like to focus on those who were most segregated. So one person, and the only one, from type 1, and one person from type 3, so who live in homogeneous social environment. And here is the first narrator who is a single person, has higher education and works in a furniture store, and lives in a partner's flat in Ursynów in Warsaw, so it's quite a wealthy district in Warsaw. And his biographical axis. He was born in a small village in Mazovian Voivodeship. After his parents' divorce, mother and children moved to her family's home in next village. And he lived in a very poor and homogeneous environment in this village with his friends who were together in yard, go together to schools. They were hooligans, and they were some, we can see some pathological behavior among them, and also among teachers from primary school. The first change that happened, it was start of education in vocational school in a small town near his village. Also, he started to work there with his colleagues, with his friends, and it was he worked in KFC that was located in petrol station, and this place was very important. It was his first window to the world, and for the first time, for example, he saw there a man who stopped there just to drink coffee, for example, not to eat, and it was something new to him. For the first time, he saw such a behavior. The next step, the next windows of change, it was starting studies of occupational and health and safety in Warsaw, and he started to work here also. It was the time of very chaotic time, so very frequent changing of place of residency, very frequent changing of work. It was time of partying with random people, but also on the other hand, it was the first time that he went abroad. It was his only abroad travel in his life. It was a student bus trip to Greece, and with some student organizations, student travel. Later on, now he has a stable job. He stays in stable relation. Some hobbies appear in his life. So the life now has changed and became more stable. And the second example, it is the example of a woman who has adult children with upper secondary education. She works as a shop assistant in one of the shops of the famous chain of grocery stores in Poland. And here she comes from a small town in central Poland. Her parents moved immigrated to Warsaw as she was young. At first, they changed very frequently their place of residence. But when she was 7, they moved to the district with quite good reputation in Warsaw. It was a new housing estate, and she started to go to elementary school here. She lived here in a quite homogeneous environment. The first change that happened, it was the start of education in secondary school. Now then she became much more mobile. However, still she lived in homogeneous environment. The second change, it was she finished secondary school and she started to work, and she moved to her home on the northern district of Warsaw, and it was a very dynamic part of her life. So new hobbies appeared. She started traveling abroad. And another change was the new relationship, marriage, and childbirth. Then the activities decreased, so she was still quite mobile, but she moved between a few fixed places and fixed relations. When children were older, she started to work, but after suffering from depression, she started the work as this shop assistant that is considered by her as a degradation to her. And what are my preliminary conclusions? First of all, mobility segregation changes throughout the lifetime. Mobility segregation experience throughout the lifetime is much a deeper problem than residential segregation or this activity space segregation in a certain point of life. But there are windows of change when mobility segregation during lifespan can change. And although there is a relative high degree of mobility of narrators, who I was talking about today, mortality is an important feature of low social profile inhabitants and limits access to differentiated places. And there is some research on social segregation, the comparisons between social segregation at night and during the day, at work or at home, and my research also supports these findings, but what is important, they take into account the coexistence of people of different social profile in shared spaces, but they don't measure the experienced segregation in experienced places. What is interesting, my second narrator, who lived in this new housing estate, lived in a homogeneous, her social relationships were among people of lower social profile. However, Ursynów is known for people of people well educated and of higher social profile. However, they weren't. It wasn't the environment of the narrator. So here are the questions. Does interaction between social groups really occur in these shared spaces? Yes, and what is the strength of these relations? For example, for the first narrator who studied in Warsaw, who works in Warsaw, what are the relationships there? They aren't covered by this quantitative analysis. So here I see the need for qualitative research in social segregation studies. So the experienced segregation in experienced places, and here this biographic method gives a tool to this. And thank you for listening to me, and now I am ready for questions if there are any.
Maybe not a question or notice. I lived in Warsaw for a half a year, and the history of Warsaw is quite unique in the sense that the infrastructure and the buildings are, because of the destruction of the Second World War, are relatively new, and I think it is quite influences, you know, these segregation patterns too, right? So, but as I heard, there is one district on the right bank, Praha district. Am I the right bank of the Vistula, which has older buildings? Is different patterns may be observable there?
Yes, you are talking about Praga district. That was actually, it wasn't destroyed during the World War, and actually it has some degraded housing infrastructure, and there is high concentration of communal housing, for example, and also of this lower social population. And there we can notice something else, because today I was talking about newcomers to Warsaw, actually, and there are families who live for generations in the same building, in the same flat, for example, and there they live also in a very homogeneous environment. I also had a narrator who came from who lived there, still lives there, whole her life, and there I could observe much lower mobility, spatial mobility, yes, and being in very close relations in the neighborhood of Praga, people, of the neighbors, yes, and living, for example, schools that were close to her home, and also work, who is also in Praga district. That is also very characteristic, yes, that Praga people very often, if they work, because there is also high rate of unemployment, but if they work, usually they work in Praga also. So this lower levels of mobility and high mobility segregation is really seen there to much more extent.
Thank you for your answer. Magdalena Dragan asked another question. Can you see it?
Yes. Wait a minute. Does your observations on mobility have something in common with gentrification? Here I focus on low social profile groups, and in my group there weren't any people who were moved away by gentrification, but because here we could focus on because here these low social profile groups are usually pushed away, yes, from gentrified areas. So there weren't such people in my research group. No, here in this research, and I don't focus on this gentrification process. However, in my previous research on residential segregation, yes, but it was quantitative research. It had different character.
Thank you for your answer. If there are no other questions, I think we are way into the coffee break, but and let's close this discussion, and thank you for everyone, the presenters and for the attendees, the participation, and let's enjoy the rest of the conference. Goodbye.
Okay, it's 1:15, so I think it's a very good time to start. We are in a very small group, but still there is a group where everybody is involved in the research that is going to be presented today. So I hope it's going to be really a nice part of listening and discussion. So let me welcome you on behalf of Krzysztof Gwozdź, who is the co-chair together with me. And he is present also here online. You can see him waving to you. On this special session focused on digital entrepreneurs on the pathways of regional development. And within this session today, we have 3 papers to be presented. The first paper is a case study from Hungary on learning factories. It's going to be presented by Tamás in a short moment. Later on, we will have Robert presenting on behalf of the team, similarly to the first author, to the first presenter, on the issues of dealing with big data and public statistics in case of analyzing digital entrepreneurs. And he will use the case of Poland, the example of how he and his colleagues prepared data for further analysis, data concerning digital entrepreneurs. And last but not least, we will have a presentation by Wojciech. It's also a teamwork, and this is going to be a result of an international study, and this is a study on the digitalization of companies, the barriers, the enablers, and the way COVID-19 affected the digitalization of businesses. So altogether, we are in the mainstream of digital entrepreneurs, and I believe that's going to be really a nice afternoon for all of us, and of course, quite a handful of inspiration. Just for organizing 15 minutes, and I do hope that's going to be enough and you just fit in time. If there are more people coming to the session, we will probably later on move to a little bit shorter presentations to leave a little bit more space for discussion. But if there is a 15-minute presentation from every side or 13-minute, that's gonna be enough. Together with Krzysztof, we'll control the time and later on, of course, enable asking questions and discussions. In the meantime, you can use the chat. And that's all for the warm-up, I think. And it's high time to give the floor to Tamás for the first presentation. Hey, Tamás, the floor is yours. Thank you.
What is the purpose of a learning factory in this digitization framework? The concept of human-centered implementation in Industry 4.0, which is the extension of Industry 4.0, is now focusing on sustainable, human-centric, and resilient European industry. And a learning factory as a concept was created in order to provide a learning environment where testing and experimentation opportunities are helping the companies. And one element which is the focus of our research is the implementation of a digital twin. So a virtual representation of the physical product, which can help to study opportunities, make improvements, and run simulations for this purpose. Next slide, please. So with this objective in mind, who are the target groups of digital learning factory? Of course, SMEs are in the primary focus, especially the high growth SMEs, which have a good development potential, but also technology centers, engineering and R&D companies are also important partners for a learning factory in order to create a good innovation ecosystem together with universities and research institutes. And large companies can also an important target group because a learning factory can cooperate with a big company to make a showcase service and similar activities, which again can contribute to the efficient development of innovation community. Next slide, please. So with such a learning factory, how can training be formulated? Of course, it is based on what the future of manufacturing is requiring from the workforce, and also to look in the more distant future, the technical education can be sort of focused in learning factories in such a way that the skilling, upskilling and reskilling needs of companies could be satisfied, and all these didactics can be integrated into the learning curricula, not only in the higher education, but also in the middle school as well. Next slide, please. So with all this said, what are the key activities of a learning factory? As you can see here, it is not just technical or technological type of actions, but the collaborative ecosystem development is also in focus, and the strategic partnerships with technology centers and companies are also very important. So this is the short summary about a learning factory as a tool for developing the innovation ecosystem. Next slide, please. And now I would like to give you a few information about what are we doing in Hungary in this focus. First point is the AI coalition in Hungary, which has created the national AI strategy, and this process also focus on manufacturing, and full-fledged digital learning factory project have been defined with detailed description of work pages. And I would like to draw your attention to work page number 6, virtual manufacturing service, because the learning factory is not only offering physical implementation opportunity, but also by cloud services, virtual manufacturing services can be also provided by such an organization. Next slide, please. Because this is the concept. And where are we at the moment in Hungary with that? First point to mention is that our university and research institutes in Hungary are cooperating with German and Austrian partners, and there is also a joint company established by the German Fraunhofer Institute and the Computer Science Research Center in Hungary. Next slide, please. Okay, that was the national level. And where are we in Europe, in our university? Our focus is on smart, sustainable, and advanced manufacturing. And we are partnered with the Vorarlberg University of Applied Sciences in Germany in the framework of the RUN EU project. So this is the research side. Next slide, please. Because research is important, but the practical service which is available for SMEs is also something that should be in the focus. And as you can see on the map, the teaching and learning factory is developed in cross-border cooperation. The site in Szombathely is working together with several partner organizations in Austria, and thematic working groups are formed in such a way that go across borders. Next slide, please. Because I think that the most important elements are the tangible actions that our team in the learning and learning factory can implement together with companies. As you can see, it's chronology is in about 10 months' time since the teaching and the learning factory unit was installed in our office in Szombathely. So as you can see, various forms of artificial intelligence applications have been developed with companies, and this way digitization is brought within reach of these companies. It means that our team in the Teaching and Learning Factory is working together with the SMEs, but we are also developing further the infrastructure with such modules, with such solutions that can be tailor-made for one company and also for the next one, since the Learning Factory is a testing ground for different applications that are suitable for the individual needs of the companies. So I think that I have 2 more minutes. So if you advance the slide, that is the closing slide in my presentation, because all this Learning Factory service can be very efficiently brought into the cross-border cooperation area by the Digital Innovation Hubs, which is a European network that will start its operation in a couple of months' time. And this DIH network can offer tailor-made services to SMEs, and where Teaching and Learning Factory is present, I believe that these teaching and learning factories can be a very good element in the regional innovation ecosystem, and the connection point toward other regions can be implemented within the framework of this European Digital Innovation Hubs network. Our office, our workshop in Szombathely is also part of this network. So I think that in the next couple of years, we will be able to extend our cooperation network beyond a cross-border arrangement into a really European-wide cooperation for developing new solutions for companies. So this is where we are, and I would be very glad to tell you more details about the different details of the experience that we have collected with this Teaching and Learning Factory infrastructure. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And this is actually an invitation to ask questions or discuss the presented case study. If there's anybody in the room who would like to ask for something.
So maybe I will ask the first question if there is not any other. Tamas, I have a question concerning what type of companies you're cooperating in the project. I mean by branch division or by capital. Are there mainly big companies, I don't know, from automotive or other sectors, any other? So this is my first question. And second, if I may, I would ask you, what type of obstacles do you see taking into account the contemporary, let's say, European or overall situation to implement the project you are working? Thank you.
I see. So the first point, our region in the western part of Hungary is characterized by the manufacturing industry. So the biggest part of our clients are small or middle-sized companies, and the solutions that we develop them are the production, implementation, like the conveyor belt, how to optimize the delivery of materials from this part to the other. And this calls for a lot of engineering optimization in order to make the production line work with less number of faults and more efficiency. So it's basically SMEs, no large companies so far within the client base. And the second question about what are the obstacles, I think that European policies are very good good guidance about where we should go, but the programs that are implemented on a national level follow only loosely these type of policy guidelines. Therefore, sometimes it is difficult to find national or regional goal where the needs of the companies can be really well supported. So more integration or more synergy of the national goals, national support schemes, and European policies, I think could help our task, and also it would be a better environment for the SME clients.
I would like to ask you, Tamas, about the business model of this learning factory. Is it like supported by the EU money or the research grant of the country? And are the companies paying for the service, or it is given for free as a kind of a dissemination? How does it work?
It's a very interesting question, because the experience in European countries offers us different models. For example, the partner organization from Germany, Fraunhofer Institute, has the model where three types of funding is available: public money, research grant, and direct service revenue from companies. And these three areas occupy approximately the same percentage in the income. In the Hungarian case, unfortunately, the private direct service provision could only be starting now. So in our case, the national grants are very important, but the research activity is not financed in direct grants for such type of business-oriented establishments. Therefore, I think that our realistic business plan for the next 3 to 5 years relies very heavily on national subsidies, and the income from direct service to companies can be built up gradually over the years. This is how we foresee the situation. And the own research, which I mentioned, that our engineering colleagues are often developing solutions within the learning factory. This is a smaller part of the budget, because this is like investment in the future type of action.
I see. And the next presentation will be delivered by Robert Szczepanek, and that's the teamwork, of course. And as already introduced, this is about data collection and how data on digital entrepreneurs in Poland can be collected in a, let's say, automated way and then used for the research purpose. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of the team presented here on this first slide, I would like to present our preliminary results on challenges in collecting and analyzing data on digital entrepreneurs. It will be a mixture of theory, mixture of practice, and new methods. But for the beginning, let's define what the digital entrepreneur are. So we define them as companies that provide software and hardware solutions classified as Industry 3.0 for industrial clients. So we are interested in all the companies that provide sophisticated tools or software related to Industry 4.0. And the main question we tried to answer in this research were the following. So the first one was that can we somehow automatize data gathering because when we look at the databases where the data are collected, so taking the information manually, it's very time consuming, and it's source of potential errors. So if we will be able to make this process automatic, it will be possible to make better data sources and easier correct potential errors. And the second question was, is it possible to find some common pattern of companies? We'll call them entities because we'll collect all the data in databases. So what are connections between those companies and how they relate to each other, having in mind that each company, each entity can have several features, like when the company started working, what field of industry they are related to, in which voivodeship they work. So there are several features, and how to combine those information in some logical pattern. To do that, we started with very simplistic method. So we collected information on digital entrepreneurs from all over Poland, and we collected that based on the method of co-occurrence of business activity codes, NACE, related to Industry 4.0. So what we did, we predefined the codes related to Industry 4.0, and we tried to get from several databases information about those businesses. As the source of the data, we use mainly three locations, three databases. The first one was the European Patent Office, IPO, and that we can treat as the smallest set of the data, because of course, if we look at the whole range of the companies, very small amount of the companies are registered in the patent office. The second register we used was the National Court Register, and here is one tricky problem I will discuss later, but this is the source of the information at the mid-level. So there are many companies, but not all of them. And the third source of information is the largest one, is the Central Register of Economic Activity. I will present information about gathering data from that place, but due to amount of the information from this source, I will not analyze the data from this place. So in this presentation, we'll focus exclusively on those two sources of the data. When we are talking about the data collection, there are two possible methods. The first one is the manual method. So we connect to the database, or we look to some interface on the web page, and we manually get the data. So that was used in the case of this first database. So the information from this source was collected manually, and for 100 entities, it took more or less 15 hours. This source of information will be presented in red on slides later. So if we look at the ratio between number of hours and the outcome, it's about 6 entities per hour. So this is not too much. Of course, this is time-consuming process. The second source was the National Court Register, and here we mixed the methods. We started with manual method, selecting the data, selecting the entities, and then we spent time to code access to the database. And this access was not directly to the National Court Register, because this this database is extremely unfriendly in the terms of automatization. So we had to use commercial service as the interface to that open database. So it took 8 hours for coding the scripts and 2 hours to get the data. So 1,000 entities. It took about 25 hours to 25 entities per hour. So we see that it was much faster, about 5 times faster, and those entities will be shown in gray on the next slides. And the last source of information, the Central Register of Economic Activity, we got almost 1.5 million entities, spending 40 hours on coding and 5 months on gathering the data. And this gives 400 entities per hour. But as you will see, the problem is here, the 5 months, which was related not to our system. It was related to constraints of the database. The data we collected in the form of simple files. This is example of one of the files. It's saved in the JSON format. So we selected the JSON as a basic data storage format because this is easy to read by human and it's easy to process by machines. There are several problems related to data collection. And the first one is that there are limits of the operating system in storing the files. So for example, if we use FAT32, we can store only 65,000 files in one folder. For other systems, this number is not so small, but the problem is that when we have, let's say, 100,000 files in the folder, it's very difficult to handle that. So we divided our data in hierarchical structure. We divided folders into voivodeships and within voivodeship into counties. So it gave us between 1,000 and 130 entities per folder. So that was possible to handle manually and to check and to see what we have. Because of the amount of the data, especially the third data source, we start to implement 2 tools. The first one is the Elasticsearch, is the tool to efficiently search within JSON files, so we can search through all the files collected in this structure. And the second tool is the Parquet format. It gives a possibility of storing all the JSON files in one file. So we can merge all the information within one compressed and very efficient format. So that's those solutions are at the moment implemented. Few words about data gathering from this largest database. So we faced several problems. The first problem was that it was not possible to get the data directly. We had to first get the list of the entities of the companies for a given country and for given code. And the response was not full, so it was limited to 100 entities in one request. So if there are 300 entities, we had to make 3 requests. In that process, we faced several errors from the server side. So we decided to log those errors. It means that we collected information for which country and code we had a problem collecting the data. So we collected the data in JSON format, and then at the same time, we collected the information about potential errors. So when we knew information about the entities within the country and for a given code, we downloaded the data itself. So to download the data, we had to download entity by entity. And there is a limit of 1,000 requests per hour. It seems that it's large amount of requests, but it's not. If you divide the number of entities we collected by this 1,000, it will give you those few months to collect the data. So finally, we had to implement the sleeping time of 4 seconds between 2 requests. And again, we had to log errors because there were many errors. At the end, we tried to download all the files from the log file with the error. So this was like an iterative process. As I said, the main problem with data gathering are the request limits and the system availability, because about 75% of our code for data collection was responsible just for error handling. So this was not the logic how to get the data, it was the logic how to handle when the data is not possible to get. There is a simple solution. If we look at the OpenStreetMap project, for example, there is a method where we can download a set of the data for country or for region or for continent. Here is no implemented such a solution, and that's why we have to make several requests to the server. That's bad in my opinion. The data processing was the following: that we use exclusively the business activity codes. So we didn't look at the beginning at any other information. We just took the activity codes. So we selected 70 codes related to the industry, and then we binary decoded that information in the form of 0 and 1, creating a matrix with 1,000 rows and 558 columns. So each column corresponds to one activity code number, and that information gave us database for the whole system of industry 4.0. Because of that, so we had the activity codes, but in that data set collected only from those 2 CERS sources, so the patent office and the court register, we got 558 dimensional space. So to process the data, we had to reduce the dimensionality of the data to 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. So we used for that the principal component analysis, and the second method, which is new from year 2018, and it's called uniform manifold approximation and projection. This is very fast nonlinear method, and here are the results. Here are results of two-dimensional reduction of this highly dimensional space. So on the left plot, we can see principal component analysis. So we see that there are some clusters visible, but they are not so clear. If we implement the new method, which is called UMAP, we can very easily see that there are 3 clusters. So the cluster 1 on the left bottom side, the second cluster is on the top, and the third cluster is on the right bottom. In the 3-dimensional space, it's also very easy to distinguish. So the red dots are from the patent office database, and this is from PCA method. And here is the result for the UMAP method. So we can see that this new method is really extraordinary in segmenting the data. And looking finally at the results, we can see that here on the left axis, we have the division code. So those are the codes which we use for the search. And depending on the cluster, we can see that there is a difference within the clusters in the share of the NACE codes depending on the code. So in different clusters, so for example, in cluster number 1, the smallest one, we see that the NACE codes from division 46 are dominating the rest. Here is another, just 2 slides to the end. This is yet another result. So those 3 clusters made just using the NACE codes, we can divide and describe in terms of year of commencement of operation. So we see that the companies from the cluster 1 are the oldest ones, while from the cluster 3 are the youngest, with the medium after 2010. And the last slide is a share of companies by voivodeship. And here we also can see that, for example, in cluster 1, we have a very strong impact of Pomorskie voivodeship. The rest, it's not so easy to interpret, but this result, it's really clear on this plot. Thank you very much, and I'm waiting for potential questions. Thank you.
Tamas, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I would like to know whether this new method that you used, it is generally better as the principal component analysis. So it's or it is this particular set of data which is very much suitable for this new type of analysis. So my point is, do you think that it is a general improvement of this new method with respect to PCA, or it is a phenomenon linked to this data set that you are used?
Well, so I was surprised by these results, but this method is really excellent. So I mean, in my opinion, this is the biggest outcome of this research for me, that this UMAP method is really excellent in reduction dimensional space. So probably at the moment, this is the best method to reduce dimensions, and has many advantages comparing to PCA and other methods. And this is not only for this data set. There are several examples where this method really shows excellent performance, and it's really fast because there is another method called TSM, I think, but it's much slower. So the time it's exponential, and here the time is linear. It's based on topological analysis of the data in highly dimensional space. So it's very efficient and very good method. I would recommend that.
I see your point. Okay, so it is definitely, I will definitely look it up, and in case there is some particular question that comes up, I might turn to you with some more details about how you employed this UMAP method in your research.
Yes, definitely. You are welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamas. And that's also a very good start for the potential networking for the future. I wonder whether you can answer briefly, Robert, but it might be for many people a very sexy thing to gather those loads of data. And if somebody is really knows nothing about that, what should be the first step to get into the world of accessing big data? Any kind of training, or what course should he or she take, whatever?
I think today the training is not needed. There are plenty of material, so I would start just using the code which is available in GitHub on other repositories. Just start using Python because it is easy. So I think within 1-2 hours, person who has no experience should be able to get simple data and try to use that data. So just start using Python. That's the simplest method. No courses, no workshops, just the internet and information which is available in public repositories.
Just do it as I like. Okay, again, as introduced, Wojciech together with Eleonora, they will present, or Wojciech will present the paper on digitalization of companies in Europe, and especially about the influence of COVID on it. And yeah, that's an international study, so let's hope it's gonna be very interesting and promising. Wojciech, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Chairman, dear participants of this session. I have a pleasure of presenting results of the project that was part of the fellowship of the National Agency for Academic Exchange at the University of Padova. And indeed, it's the international study done together with Professor Eleonora Di Maria. She works in the Digital Manufacturing Laboratory at the University of Padova. So what's the outline today? I would like to introduce to the subject of digitalization as a policy priority in Europe, and then shortly come back to the issue of digital innovation hubs, the issue that we've already heard in the first presentation, and then the research results. So I treat digitalization as the process by which businesses are integrating ICT technologies into their practices. And Industry 4.0 are part of the digitalization process because these are the advanced digital solutions in production and management that are utilizing internet and connectivity innovations. Due to its high innovation potential, policies supporting Industry 4.0 implementation or digitalization in Europe started to appear a few years ago. They are, so to say, part of innovation systems and part or extension of smart specialization strategies. And the research showed that these two phenomena, digitalization, Industry 4.0, create potential for all types of regions, European regions, but differing in terms of most promising technologies. But due to this high potential, there is a need to support digitalization in all the regions. There are some, however, barriers hampering digitalization. And among the most important, there are, for example, lack of knowledge and skills among employees, barrier of culture, no willingness to invest or organizational resistance, and also financing and system. And one of the most important Europe-wide initiatives that facilitate popularization of Industry 4.0 technologies are digital innovation hubs. They were introduced by the European Union strategy Digitalizing European Industry, and then further developed by Digital Europe program. And the next step in this initiative will be European Digital Innovation Hubs. And the idea is that these are the business support organizations which are located in different European regions, so widely available to regional stakeholders. They offer individual consultancy to firms in the form of digital assessment, advices on Industry 4.0 investment strategies, testing for investments, They organize webinars, trainings, events, creating awareness about digital technologies, and they also provide the digital infrastructure. And some of these features were presented also in the first presentation today. COVID-19 pandemic suddenly interrupting the ongoing process of digitalization and brought some significant changes, especially concerning remote working and online meetings, but also online sales. But the scale of this process could differ between European regions. So our research questions were the following: what activities are undertaken at the regional level to facilitate adoption of digital industry 4.0 innovations in companies, and how the COVID-19 pandemic influenced the process of digitalization of companies in Europe. To answer these research questions, we in the first step we conducted secondary data analysis and interviews with experts from 3 European regions treated as case studies. So we selected Baden-Württemberg in Germany, Veneto and Friuli Venezia Giulia in Italy, and Wielkopolskie in Poland, regions with different innovativeness and digitalization levels. And in each region, we contacted two speakers, one from the Digital Innovation Hub and one from administration or a unit that is helping in digitalization of companies. And in the second step, we conducted also online survey among experts in digitalization. In total, 124 participants, representing mainly digital innovation hubs took part in the study. And then we analyzed research results, dividing the sample into old and new European Union countries, and then dividing countries into those with higher and lower level of innovativeness, and the so-called Digital Economy and Society Index, DESI Index. We were able to identify 8 actions, types of actions that are fostering Industry 4.0 implementation, namely investments in the internet infrastructure as a basic point for all the other digitalization and Industry 4.0 activities. Then strategic planning and monitoring of Industry 4.0 development, creation of awareness about available Industry 4.0 technologies, then promotion of good practices of implementations in firms within the regions. Next, financial support and individual consultancy for Industry 4.0 implementation in firms, preparing workers for the demands of Industry 4.0 through different education programs and trainings, supporting Industry 4.0 startups, and international promotion and networking of regional firms. To each of these types, we gave the example of actions, and if you would be more interested in details, these results are already published in the paper in Investigaciones Regionales. The second part of the study, based on a survey, is still a draft paper. And here are some of the results. So firstly, as for the assessment of the digitalization of companies during the COVID-19 pandemic, most respondents agreed that indeed the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated the process of digitalization, but it is more evident for service companies and for the software digital technologies rather than hardware technologies utilizing digital solutions. Also, the respondents replied that the digitalization during the COVID-19 pandemic was faster in large companies rather than small and medium enterprises. Let me skip these 2 slides to go straight to the factors that contributed most to the digitalization of firms in respondents' country in the last 3 years. According to respondents, what contributed most to the digitalization was uncertainty concerning restrictions and entrepreneur skills reaction to the sudden COVID-19 pandemic, which shows that indeed the COVID-19 pandemic had a significant impact on the digitalization, while, for example, activities of digital innovation hubs or public supporting organizations meant a bit less important in here. We also asked about the biggest barriers for the further digitalization of firms in respondents' country, and here among the those barriers that were rated as highest, respondents mentioned lack of knowledge on technologies as one of the biggest barriers. So it means that dissemination of knowledge would be important in the next years. Lack of skills among workers and lack of financial resources. These were the 3 top largest barriers for the further digitalization. While, for example, resistance of workers, fear on investment risks, or technological backwardness, these were rated as smaller barriers for further digitalization. Here you can see the most effective actions that are supporting firms in digitalization in respondents' countries, and most respondents here mentioned, indicated promotion of good practices as effective action that is supporting firms, but then in the second place, individual consultancy, and in the third, webinars and trainings as those actions that should be supported mostly. Then a bit less percentage of respondents replied that also informal meetings, helping in obtaining funds, and also fair trades events, newsletters. These are the actions that are rated as not as promising as the effort mentioned. And finally, the speakers were also assessing the possible long-lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic to the digitalization of companies. I'm heading towards the end. And online meetings and online participation in conferences, events by employees will be standard in companies in my country at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also less business travel. These 2 are believed to be the most long-lasting effects, but also online sales will be the important effect, and remote working also. So last but not least, we check the differences between groups of countries. So there we didn't find the statistically significant differences for online meetings, less business travel, and e-commerce. These elements are believed to be important after the COVID-19 in all types of countries. While there are some statistically significant differences in terms of remote working, flexible workspaces, and less permanent employment, namely the higher the INNO level and the DESI level, the higher is the chance that remote working will be standard in companies after the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the higher a chance that the flexible workspaces will be more popular. But at the same time, those representatives of high innovation countries and those with high DESI index are believed that the long-lasting effect will not include less permanent employment. And to conclude, a variety of actions at the regional level help firms in digitalization. And among the most important, there are strategic planning, awareness creation, promotion of good practices, financing, preparing workers through education activities, supporting startups and networking. Online meetings and reduction in business travel are believed to become a universal in Europe, long-lasting effects of digitalization of companies during the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are some differences, again, between countries differing in the innovativeness and the DESI index, and also between countries in terms of factors, barriers, and most effective actions supporting digitalization.
Thank you very
This
much.
can be important for policymakers.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Wojciech. And the last chance to ask questions or comment something within this session.
Well, actually, I have many, because presentation of Wojciech provokes a lot of questions. But maybe, Wojciech, one question, because I saw you skip the divide between, let's say, the old and new countries, maybe, or between, I don't know, Germany, Italy, and Poland. And I would like to ask you, from your research and observations, what are the main differences between the innovation systems or actions which are undertaken, let's say, in the more mature digital country and the newcomers like Poland, for example?
So from our study, we see that in Baden-Württemberg, the region that we investigated, there is a clear strategy for digitalization. There is a large source of funds, financing of different activities from those that I mentioned in here, while in Poland is usually about thinking, strategic planning, that's fine, but no financing and no real action. So the more innovative and the more developed in terms of digitalization the region or the country is, the more comprehensive approach there is, the more financing. And in Baden-Württemberg, there is a special organization employing lots of specialists that are responsible for each or many of the aforementioned activities facilitating digitalization. So there is a special unit for trainings, for learning factories, a special unit for coordinating digital innovation hubs and consultancy, a unit for strategic planning and monitoring, where the board meets. So it's a comprehensive approach. And indeed, also the elements of Industry 4.0 and digitalization go into regional innovation strategies. So there are concrete chapters in innovation strategies devoted strictly to Industry 4.0. And also what I've noticed that there are in those two Italian and German regions that we looked at more deeply, we saw that there are some special projects and programs to promote widely Industry 4.0 technologies. So the promotion is about, for example, giving the best practices from those companies that already implemented certain Industry 4.0 technologies, and through these good examples and good real companies that can share their knowledge and experience, they try to get more understanding about what Industry 4.0 technologies may bring to regional companies. So that would be my answer concerning the differences between countries or regions.
Thank you very much. And I think the further questions we need to move to exchange of emails or individual meetings. All the speakers can
I
meet
hope
online.
that to keep the debate via online.
Yeah, we keep the debate going. We read the papers as it was presented by Wojciech. One of the publication was already made out of his project, of their project. And let's continue the scientific or research debate in this way. As if my co-host would like to add something, or we just close the session and move to the closing ceremony.
Yeah, actually, thank you all the presenters, because I think that, as Marcin said in the very beginning, it was a small group, I think very focused on the subject. So I hope we will keep in touch and perhaps have opportunities to delve into the issues we touched here. So thank you very much for all your contributions. And also thank you for our technical support. Thanks to it, the session went quite smoothly. So thanks a lot, and hoping to see you soon and having opportunity to discuss.
Thank you very much, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Bye-bye.